I think now if we can have the presenters that were up come up, and we'll kind of have an interactive panel discussion. But after what Helena said, wow, the timing worked out, I think, where she left just how little automation or prefab we have in the current existing market, yet how much potential is there, and how much we do need the Europeans. I have the same thing. That's why I have a Swiss business partner. It's like, well, we don't have the machines, so we have to use them. The software is all coming from Europe too for the mass timber, and that's in the majority of all the factories. And the argument I'm always making, the Americans like to raise a lot of money and build a building and fill it full of really expensive machines that take a year or two to show up. And then like, well, we'll figure out how to run it. We'll just go find those people after we're done that, after we've sold a few thousand buildings. Obviously, that's kind of a recipe that won't work out. And we're seeing a lot more of that, even in mass timber right now. So on one hand, there's all the potential in the world. And at the same time, a lot of companies are repeating the same mistake. Missed opportunity. Anyway, if that's only my opinion, I think if maybe we should sit there. Is that all right? And then we didn't take time really to ask questions. I'm sure people have a lot of questions. And then one of the topics I do want to address is, wow, based on all of these conversations, what we're all learning, what ideas do you have? Like, how should the US and European people working at the forefront, like all of you are, is it even of interest? Do you want to, if you're busy enough here, there's plenty of work here, and you're locally connected, you're supplied, is it worthwhile even trying to make those connections across to the US? Or is it focused, like I think Fabian was saying earlier today, the mass timber companies, many of them he knows, they're booked out for a year or two. So why are they going to bother or assume the risk to even care what's going on in a distant market like the US? Posing that question, but here, I guess who do we want to answer? You guys work together. We did this. You guys work together in the World of Volvo project, so you have a perspective where you're working the efficiencies of what you learned. If you could talk to that, if you did it again, World of Volvo again, I bet it would be, you've learned a lot, it'd be more efficient.
If I do it again, I would do it like in a forest without the glass facades. It's just sitting in a landscape.
Yeah.
But I think if I do it again in terms of sort of digital, those issues that we had, I think we would have brought in experts much earlier in the process. We tried a lot ourselves in the beginning, and we also tried with the collaborating engineers that we had at the time, which couldn't really figure it out in wood, to be honest. And we have learned a lot through that process. Of course, it's a really complex wood structure compared to you know, a more of a grid, a regular structure. But in that regard, it was really on the edge of what we also as architects were sort of used to doing. And that was really challenging, of course. And we needed experts to figure it out. If I would have gotten to know you before, maybe that could have helped, or also the industry. I think we let's shift cards afterwards. But I think we also approached. We had fortunately there were some guys from Blume Lehmann, for example, in Switzerland also that came by the office early on that we started to talk with the project about with them and they helped us out to figure it out and so on. So yeah.
Well, you've gone through that learning curve that I think every company has to, and now you have that advantage. You may not have another World of Volvo, but you'll have a lot of lessons you can apply.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, well, do you focus on marketing that knowledge here locally, or do you?
No, we do that internationally. I mean, in terms of the American, we have an office in New York, so it's more. I don't know that much on how much focus they have, to be honest, on wood. But I would say that we are definitely learning from this, and from we have plenty other wooden projects at the moment as well, and I think we're applying that knowledge more and more also internationally. But I think the challenge internationally is that the focus we have as architects is mostly involved in sustainability questions or carbon and things like that. That's our arguments for making things in wood. And that's not necessarily the main focus in all parts of the world, unfortunately, at the moment. So I think that's the main challenge, I guess.
Yeah, okay. The way we ask Stefan too, but you've gone through it too now. You can do crazy complex projects like World of Volvo. What to go after now, or how to apply those lessons?
We were very fortunate together that we had a contractor client which was foreseeing that brought us in really early, and that we had a design stage which was quite long before we had to give a final price. So I think a lot of the troubles that occur in the industry today is due to the type of contract you have with or the architect has with the client, and then they will buy a contractor and they will find the people. It's never this on the side. So it always goes up and down and here and there, and it gets really complicated. So if I can do it again, I would find a really a contractor which has the knowledge, and then bring us in together as a team. And then we do as large packages as possible. In our case, it was perfect. We had the wood, we had the glass, and all the acoustic panels. So we had a model which could take care of everything, and no interfaces. So that is my message to the contractors in that case.
And you've gone through that now. What's your kind of interest moving forward? Are there projects that come in, or do you go out to more countries, other markets?
Well, Lindner is a worldwide company, so my market is Scandinavia. If I go over there, they get really angry.
But your knowledge and experience to disseminate that even within your own company.
Yeah, we have a facade group which is active all over the world, and we try to implement the knowledge of the wooden structures and the wooden facades or timber facades, and try to market that to the rest of Europe and the world. In Germany, for example, it has been forbidden to have combustible materials in the facades for a long time. Starting to change, so it's a lot of legal and things in the way to actually do it, but. And in America, we did a House of Sweden a long time ago, embassy in Washington. And there's a lot of union issues, and if you don't know it, you can get in a lot of trouble, basically.
Well, we certainly have a lot of legal challenges in the way the whole bidding system works, as well as the way contracts function in the U.S.
Yeah, if you read a contract in the U.S., you get really scared.
Yeah, you want to be a contractor, then you should be a lawyer. Okay, great. I want to ask Enlai, you're like a lot of, but I like the Scandinavian architecture travels really well. It's really easy to sell Nordic design, and that's the good news. So we're seeing firms like yours and more Danish firms or Nordic firms getting projects in the U.S. So and Canada as well. Let's look at it as a market.
Yeah.
What are you seeing in your exposure to doing big projects there?
Okay, so the drop is that we are actually part of Perkins & Will, which is the second largest American architecture firm, and probably the fourth, I think it's the fourth largest in the world. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what we do already is in the US. Okay. And I'm heading the research across the board in adaptive transformation. So this is it's a research-based organization. And so there are many areas of research. Mass timber technologies is one of those areas of research, and I'm very closely related with that. Mm-hmm. And adaptive transformation is a research topic that I'm overseeing, and we're very closely connecting that with the Building Technology Lab, which is handling mass timber building. So, and technology. So, would we like to be in the US? Yes, we would. Yes, we are. Mm-hmm. And the other question about that is what value can we bring to each other? I mean, because we are, in a way, separate companies all held under the same umbrella, and we reach into each other with research and different, areas of practice and IT and technologies. But I would say the thing that we always have to do is meet people where they are, meaning that the US and Canada actually is ahead of us in some areas and behind us in other areas, and it's actually super valuable to have this sort of open and sharing attitude across borders. And we're always looking to partner on every project that we do. So it's not one of these things to say, would you be interested or not? It's the automatic answer, of course, is yes. But the real interesting question is like, how? Mm-hmm. And I'll let someone else take that on.
Yeah, Fabian, and I'll just ask that question then to Steve, but then I think we'll take questions from the audience. Yeah. I'm sure you have them. So
I also don't know how. I found your point very interesting when it comes to complexity in timber. Just one point I want to make. You've seen the two projects that I've shown, Swatch, 11,000 square meters of doubly curved timber grid shell with 2,800 individual facade elements on one side. And then this 8-story timber building, basically pretty straightforward, rectangular, repetitive, it seems at least. We've put almost equally many work hours into both projects to get fabrication data out for them. Because the one seems more complex because of its funky geometry, but it's nicely sorted. We have 10 different facade element types, and there's 10 different connection details to the timber structure. The other one seems simple because it's rectangular. We have about 1,000 windows in there and 92 different facade details to connect them to the timber structure. Because someone just didn't pay attention and reinvented new details on every story in every building sector of the house, for example. Which means I have 10 times as much to do with one connection as I have with the other connection there. And I think that is the lesson that we need to learn. Timber is a bit more complicated when it comes to the detailing. So the earlier you basically start kicking out options and basically try to find at least something where one size fits all. I mean, it's not possible in all the cases, of course. But if you don't start getting the complexity out of the project early, it'll just multiply over the way until the very end, and that means you have 10 different strains going down into fabrication for those details in the end. And the way we're dealing with that is always, okay, we hire more people that detail things. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's unlimited workforce out there that basically creates 2D drawings. And that was the case, and that still is the case, but the CNC machines cannot read 2D drawings. And that's the main problem that we're having here. So don't be fooled by the seemingly simpleness of orthogonality and the complexity of curved geometries. Actually, it's often the other way around.
And we have to figure out how to clone Fabian. We discussed that.
That'll be interesting.
Steve, I have a question for you, then we'll take questions from the audience. Based on those Helena's presentations and just all of the other ones, how do you see that possibly applying to the U.S. mass timber market? That's a tough one, but
well, that's pretty broad. I mean, it all applies. I think one of the things that we're all experiencing right now is this is something that we're all in the early phases of learning about. The technology itself is young, and then the people coming to it more commonly than not are coming. It's an initial step, and they don't necessarily have boatloads of mentoring along the way, et cetera, as we do for some other things that we've done. It's a different kind of step forward. You don't have the same degree of professional safety net. I was fascinated a while ago. I was invited to sit in on an internal meeting, global corporation that has done mass timber work around the world. I knew several people in the meeting from around the world. They had never met each other before that meeting. the fine work they were doing, they were pretty much doing it, crafting it without the benefit of the knowledge that was in their own corporation. And it just sort of hit me about, wow, okay, there's some inefficiencies here, et cetera. We are seeing in the U.S. right now, many of the larger players deliberately building up a mass timber muscle within their organization. They've done some work. Maybe someone did a project on the East Coast, someone else did one on the West Coast, et cetera. Then they're sitting back and going, okay, how do we, as a larger body, best work with this? And I think the answer for that will be different for different players. But we're at a point now where there's enough of it out there where that question is being asked again and again by different players. And so, I think some of the, the sense that many of us have had, myself included, about how fragmented this is. I think a lot of that is just sort of a manifestation of just, we're at the low starting point on that big inflection curve, and and as we work further up it won't be so choppy.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm sure we'll have a chance to network immediately after this panel, but there must be some questions, I assume.
Hi, thank you for the insight. It was super interesting to hear you all.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for the people at home.
Hi, thanks for your insight. Very interesting. Just a general question is there anywhere where it doesn't make sense to build in wood in your mind? If you have any insights both on the North American market or the European one, in the sense that if we make it specific to mass timber, is there a scale where it makes sense or doesn't make sense to go for wood? And is there places you see in the world or in those countries where it may not always be the answer? And that basically is the death of steel and concrete structures if we can have enough wood available to build in wood. Thanks.
Wants to take that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but from all I hear, second-hand knowledge, I mean, it's not about timber is the only solution to the problems that we're having. Timber is good in some places and probably pretty bad in other places, and the thing is that I think timber needs a fair chance to basically play on its strong sides to become more prevalent in a way. This is changing now also with regulations. I mean, we have the EU taxonomy that basically says the economic situation for different types of material is changing in the building sector. That doesn't mean that you cannot build with concrete anymore. It just means relative to timber, it probably becomes more expensive. So you will start thinking about where can I actually use this because it's beneficial, and where do I replace it with something that is cheaper and does the same job. And that, I think, is the important thing that we need to think about now.
Sorry. It might be worthwhile going just ahead because I'm going to address your question with more questions. So you can answer them. And the point is that obviously there's no silver bullet in the material industry, there's no silver bullet in the building industry. Timber has its drawbacks. It's fantastic for carbon. It's a renewable resource. But, mass timber often uses polyurethane glues or worse. It has certain qualities that make it, not very good for different parts of buildings and structures. Mold and moisture can be an issue. So, yes, they can be overcome, but, you need specific, qualities of envelope or knowledge and crafts. So part of the story comes down to the human capital and the knowledge base and the ability to actually do this work of pre-engineering and designing. Another one comes down to the idea that perhaps timber is, once it becomes mass timber, is not circular in the sense that you can't put it back into the ground. It's a mixture of synthetic materials and natural materials. And of course, you can put stuff back into the ground if it will decompose, but mass timber has elements that will not, most of the time, unless there's lignin binders, but we haven't really gotten there on the larger scale yet. So then the third part is land use. And we know that when you've got a green area, and not all green is the same quality of green. So if you've got a patch of grass, you're looking at a biodiversity desert. If you're looking at a forest, it depends what kind of forest, whether it's biodiverse or not, right? Whether it's actually regenerative or healing. So when you can have managed forests, of course, but in a lot of cases, those managed forests are one type of tree, and that's not terribly good for biodiversity. And if you're making resource demands from the building industry on land use, it's not only the quality of the soil and the lack of biodiversity, but the pressure on the food system and the pressure on all of these. And biofuels have got even worse story to tell about that. So the answers about whether it is or it is not appropriate demands a level of research on a case-by-case scenario that I don't think you can have a simple answer for in the first place. So I'll leave the complex answers to you.
It's a great question. Just a sort of a side note, when I first got involved in mass timber, there were some pretty clear understandings about where the construction would be suitable and where it would not be suitable. And I'll tell you that right now there's been a lot of successful construction in situations that earlier people were saying, no, it's not going to work there, here's the reasons. And yet it has happened several times in different ways. For me, when I heard your question, the thing that I went to that was most important for me actually goes back to what you were just talking about with where the material comes from, because you can't have sustainable buildings made out of wood if you don't have sustainable forest. And we don't have sustainably managed forest globally at this time. And so I think, in part, that the focus on these buildings being sustainable, will force a discipline within the supply chain that is very uneven at this particular moment. And around the world, I'll just say the societal situations are different, the governance situations are different. I feel pretty good about where we are in terms of forest management in the United States. Even within the U.S., we have a fair degree of variability. I feel very good about the overall mix, of where we are. I feel very comfortable in that context, talking about these sustainable buildings being connected to sustainable forest. But I think in terms of the long-term and broad use around the world, that to me is probably as important as anything else related to mass timber. If you're going to truly be doing sustainable buildings, there needs to be a true sustainable story behind the building. That's my speech on that one.
And I want to add an answer too, because people look at me and I view the world from a digital fabricator's perspective, and they're like, you're a wood guy, you must hate the concrete guys and the steel guys. It's not true at all. People I know well who are digital fabricators of composites, metals, and doing great stuff with concrete. So I said, no, it's not material versus material, it's process. It's digital versus analog. Every building we do is hybrid. And so let's use the right material and let's do it efficiently and figure out how to get from bits to atoms for that particular type of building. I think it's wasted energy to spend time on material wars. Just my view. Any other question? Yeah, go ahead.
I totally agree. I think that there's a lot of focus on digitalization, for example, in the concrete industry as well, 3D printing in concrete to minimize material use and so on. But I think it's also a lot of focus on the sort of the opposite of digitalization, going back to the basics of how we built maybe 200 years ago with rammed earth as a possibility, or other ways of looking looking at sort of the locally sourced materials as a building component, not only wood, because there's of course a lot of places in the world where wood is a scarce commodity or material.
Yeah, we're lucky we have a lot of wood, so we're going to build a lot with that. And we've got plenty to do without saying go away from concrete and steel. There's plenty to do. And another question?
Hi, and thank you so much for all your presentations. Being a structural engineer with a lot of grasshopper and timber, I always have a question for you, Martin, with your amazing project Volvo. There's not a lot of talks from engineers today, but I hope we're welcome. And maybe you touched a little bit on it, because it seemed like a really great workflow with the parametric stuff from the beginning and also to the end with the contractor. How was it with engineering? And was that seeing that model, the parametric model, and knowing that how important it is with timber and the connections exactly, and how many connections you'll have in terms of cost and the angles and so? Did you have a collaboration on that, or how would that be? Yeah.
We had a big collaboration in that, but it took a while before we established that collaboration. I think, as I said, the first ones we met in the industry that could help us out with the scripting and sort of helping us out. We made the script, but the first ones we could actually send that script to and get a feedback back on it. That was Blume Lehmann in Switzerland. And then we worked a little bit with them, and then through the client and the process with the client and the contract came in, we also found VHAG, and there was, of course, a sort of as it is in the building industry, a bidding for who could do it the cheapest way. And then we started working with VHAG, and the same went for them. And then further on with also Lindner when it came to the glass facade systems and stuff like that. So I would say it was tough before we found the right companies or guys to collaborate with. It took us quite a while to figure out who we could. I mean, the local engineering company that we worked with through the client at the beginning, they couldn't figure it out. They didn't have the means. They had a one engineer in their company, a young girl who tried and really were engaged in working with grasshopper and rhino, but it was too much for her, unfortunately. So I would encourage more engineers to work with this, absolutely. Yeah.
To stay on schedule now, I think we'll move to the networking, so you can ask the questions all in person. And thank you to the panelists, it was great.
Thanks.
And thank you to the audience.
And just a very, very short ending note. I think I said in my presentation that we were up for a buffet of great keynotes, and I hope you joined me in really, really hitting that nail this afternoon. So thank you very, very much from Blocks Up, from me, of course. Thank you to you, Greg, for organizing. Thank you to Peter for organizing. Thanks to you, Stefan, coming. You, Steve, Martin, Fabian, Enlai, for great presentations. Ending on, was it 100 slides in 10 minutes? Roughly 10 minutes. That was a great ending note. But this will be the end of a great afternoon of very, very important high quality keynotes and high quality discussions. And thank you for your questions also. But it will be the start.